Hurts has got it, wants to throw. Hurts setting up the screen. It is complete and blown up. Miles Sanders caught it. Malcolm Rodriguez was there waiting for him. That's a big play by Rodrigo.
Welcome to another edition of the Twentyman in the Huddle podcast presented by Microsoft. He is PJ Clark. He joins me every Sunday after the game. And unfortunately, PJ, we've got to talk about another Lions loss.
Another Lions loss.
Yeah, 4 in a row. And the disappointing thing, I think, is just, Dan said all week, we got to focus on this game. This game is the one that's so important. Coming out of the bye, you had lost 3 straight. You're looking for some good news, some positive things, turn your season around. You went to pads in practice. You really tried to do everything you could do to get a win, to turn this thing around, and then you go to Dallas. Offensively, for a second straight week, you can't get the ball in the end zone. And look, the defense played pretty well. I'll give that defense Definitely. A lot of credit. For 2 straight weeks, I think Aaron Glenn is starting to figure some things out. You got to love what some of the young players are doing.
Yeah.
You start an Aiden Hutchinson. You see Josh Pascal for the first time. Malcolm Rodriguez obviously has been doing his thing all year, but Kirby Joseph steps in and, Aiden Hutchinson gets, 1.5 sacks. Kirby has a great turnover there. Should have had another interception. Yep. He dropped that one. We're going to talk to him about this week. He's going to be pretty upset about that one, the former wide receiver. But Malcolm makes some plays. And so finally your defense is playing well, and some of these young guys that you drafted pretty high are starting to make plays, and then the offense can't get out of their own way.
It's just 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Just you got to get both rolling at the same time at some point.
And we're talking about an offense, too, that was so good the first 4 weeks of the season. I mean, we're talking about Kansas City, Detroit, and Buffalo. That was the conversation about offensive football in the NFL the first month of the season. And now it's 29-0, 24-6. Obviously, turnovers were the huge story in Dallas. Jared Goff with 2 fumbles, 2 interceptions. Now, a couple of the fumbles late where I think, you're down and he's got to try to extend plays, and, that happens. But the first interception on the first drive of the third quarter just wasn't a good throw. He said so as much at the end of the game. Same thing with the throw to Kennedy over the middle, just low behind him, wasn't a good throw. And then you even got something crazy like Jamal Williams, who has been so sure-handed in the NFL. He's never lost a fumble.
Never.
Ever in the NFL.
6-year veteran.
What's the first time he does it? Down 10-6.
Going into
the end zone on the 1-yard line, 1st and goal. It's just, it's a snake-bitten offense, I think, right now. And they've got to find their groove because this defense is finally starting to play some pretty good football.
And I think a big part of the offense, as it has been for the whole team, is the injuries. Swift, whenever he gets back, is obviously going to be a jolt. You lost St. Brown after the first drive today. DJ Chark is on IR. These are your 3 explosive players, your 3 best guys on offense, not there.
But you can't make excuses.
No.
And
not in week
Dan
7.
Campbell, after this game, he wasn't about to make excuses for any of those injuries. He's still, and he's right, everybody deals with injuries. You still have to find a way to get it done. This is what Dan Campbell said after the game.
No, I mean, look, a little bit, there's things that pop up, but I mean, that's what we're charged with, and, we're charged, that's what I'm charged with. And so it doesn't matter who we have or what we're doing or who we're playing. I mean, the bottom line is you got to find a way to win. And I really felt like we were on track to do that. And then, we made those couple of mistakes that killed us, the turnovers, and against an opponent this good, it's good luck. This is a good opponent. It's a talented roster and it's well coached, and so.
And I did think the game plan was a good one. They weren't going to let Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence and that talented Dallas front that came into this game leading the NFL with 24 sacks. They weren't going to let them pin their ears back, and they weren't going to throw the ball 30, 40 times and make Jared Goff a statue target back there. They wanted to run the football. They wanted to play a conservative game, and it worked. Their defense complemented them really well. I mean, they were up 6-3 at halftime, and they had a chance to take the lead in the 4th quarter on the road against a good team, but you can't turn the football over.
And even to your point there, the offensive game plan, the best offensive player of the game, which is, again, no touchdown, so not saying a ton, but was a quick tight end screen to Brock Wright. And you threw that little rollout to Brock Wright, got involved a lot today, just trying to get the ball out quick, short passes and let your receivers do the work downfield. To not have Parsons and Lawrence and all those guys get, 4 seconds of opportunity.
Continue to run the football. They gained over 100 yards for a 6th straight game. I think they haven't done that since 1976. I saw, Greg Miola does a terrific job with the Lions PR, sending out some of those kind of things after every game. And, I mean, it's something you haven't done since 76 in terms of running the football consistently, something this team, this franchise has always wanted, since Barry Sanders hung them up. And now you're getting that. And then your defense plays pretty well. And now your quarterback's turning the football over. 9 for Jared in 6 games. It's too many. For a young team, for a team that's defensively just kind of trying to figure out, you've got to stay on schedule. You've got to be better than that if you're Jared Goff.
Yeah, and it's the more I feel like you get away from the run game, which, again, Jamal Williams, 15 carries today, but had 2 fumbles. You're only losing 1, but the first one wasn't exactly his fault, kind of like a fluke play, but you just, commit to the run against a Cowboys defense that showed today was not great against the run. And
they haven't been all year.
Coming in. Yeah. And I think, but it's so hard once you get down to stay committed to that because you got to pick up chunk plays. And I think they only had 1 20-yard rush today, and that was the biggest chunk that happened.
Yeah, but the game plan was working.
Yeah.
You had a chance to take that lead in the 4th quarter. And, obviously it's a tough loss, and now you've really put yourself behind the 8 ball. I think seeing just how the league went this year, I think if the draft were tomorrow, the Lions would have the number 1 pick.
Yep.
That's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah.
1 in 5 behind the 8 ball, and now you've got a Miami team that's playing Sunday night, and you've got Green Bay who's reeling a little bit. You get them at home.
They are not.
Now it's not. Now you have to win.
Yeah.
Now that's it. You've used up all that leeway that you might have. You now are Detroit Lions. You have to go on a run, or you're not going to be playing relevant football in December. And it's just so disappointing because there was so much hope and just the way the offense looked good, and you kind of figured the defense would figure it out. Now the defense is finally figuring it out a little bit. Some of these young guys are making plays, and the offense is taking a step back. And I've always said this. You look at good teams around the NFL, what do? They play complementary football. And I think Detroit has just been the exact opposite. When the offense has played good, the defense has been historically bad. When the defense has started to play well the last 2 weeks, the offense can't find the end zone. And so you're just not going to win football games that way. You've got to find a way. If you're Dan Campbell, if you're Aaron Glenn, if you're Ben Johnson, you got to find a way that you can get this whole football team on the same page. I mean, special teams wise, right? They made a couple kicks, right? Yep. That was a big question mark coming in. Now they did give up a big return, but I don't think that unit played terrible. They didn't score off that big return, so you just got to find a way to play complementary football, right?
I think the offense is something that we haven't seen the last 2 games now, not 2 weeks, but especially when the defense is starting to come around a little bit, you got to have prolonged drives. You got to keep them off the field. You got to give those guys time to kind of regroup and you want them on the field the way they're playing now, especially the way they played today. But you got to have longer drives. You can't just go 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out.
No, it wasn't all negative in Dallas, and we would be remiss if we did not talk about the game that Jeff Okudah had.
Unbelievable,
because he was terrific.
He was all over the place.
This is what the Lions were hoping they would get when they selected Jeff Okudah a couple years ago with the number 3 pick, because he was all over the field. And he's never been one to shy away from, putting his nose in the run game and coming up and hitting. But, I mean, there were plays, Peach, where he was on the entire other side of the formation and came across to make a play.
Across the field.
15 tackles. 1 tackle for loss that resulted in a punt in the first half. I mean, he was just terrific. And I asked Dan Campbell after the game about Jeff Okudah, and this is what he had to say.
Like he
played really well
today, especially in the run game.
Played really well. That was encouraging. I tell you what, he had his best week of practice this week, and that was his best game.
Coaches preach that all the time, don't they? Practice
how you play.
Practice how you play. And boy, he had a great week of practice. I bet Jeff liked having the pads on a little bit.
Yeah.
He's a physical guy.
Yeah.
I don't think fans realize how physical
he was ready to go. From the jump, the first possession,
he's got size, speed. I thought he played well in coverage as well. There were none of the penalties that had kind of bit him the last couple of weeks. Him being physical, but there were none of that. He covered really well. He was right there to tackle when somebody did catch it.
Interesting things, too. He was lined up in the box. He was covering Schultz and those tight ends, too. I think schematically they did some really interesting things that we hadn't seen from Jeff Okudah.
And that was interesting for Dallas, too. I think they loaded, one side with receivers a lot, and that left Jeff on one side to do the tight end. When the tight end didn't release, then that's an immediate cue to Jeff, like, boom, I'm just going to hit it. And he did, and he was terrific. And look, if Jeff Okudah can continue to play like that, and this defense can continue to play like that, look, they started 4 rookies, and every single one of those guys made a play.
Yep.
And so you mix in some guys like Jeff Okudah, who's only in his 3rd year. He's a young guy too.
Yep.
Ali McNeil in his 2nd year.
Yep.
There's some young guys that are starting to play pretty good, and now you're building this up, and so. Obviously, a huge test next week with Miami and all the speed.
That's the secondary.
They've got speed going everywhere. So that Aaron Glenn's going to have his problems next week. Preparing for that one. But you got to like what you saw with this defense. And what's the answer for the offense now?
I mean, on the defensive note, Josh Paschal in his first career game, I don't know how you could have drew that up any better.
Yeah,
I mean,
he was
just
good
making plays in the run game, pushing the pocket. Him and Kaminsky back obviously today, which we have talked about a lot on this podcast, was going to make the defensive line as a whole better, make Hutchinson better, and I think you saw that especially early on.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of things positive there. Offensively, they just got to go back to the drawing board.
I mean, again, you never want to make the injury excuse, but you need chunk plays, and Swift is your chunk play guy.
Yeah.
And I think that'll certainly help.
And it sounds like he's getting closer. I know he was questionable this week. He participated in practice in a limited basis. He was a game time decision, didn't go. But Campbell said afterward, hopefully we have him next week. And I don't think Dan would say that unless he's got a pretty good idea that he's probably going to be back next week.
You do have the benefit of 3 professional running backs, that you don't have to push DeAndre Swift if he's not 100%, because Jamal is a good 1B to his 1A. Craig Reynolds, Justin Jackson, those guys are pros, but nobody is DeAndre Swift on this offense right now.
And losing St. Brown, I think, was big too. Yeah. I talked to TJ Hawkinson this week in the locker room, and I just asked him about, what that offense missed without St. Brown. And then with St. Brown, let's be honest, he was 85%. He didn't look himself in New England. No. And TJ was talking about just the pressure that it puts on the safety, especially this defense. It's a single high safety look, right? Dan Quinn brought that over from Seattle, and just what that does to the safety when you have Saint on one side and Hawk on the other side, and the decision that safety has to make. And now St. Brown goes out, he gets hit in the head. Obviously, the league is taking a very close look at that right now. He kind of went to his knees and shook his head, and the referee, I think, did the right thing by stepping in, saying, "Hey, go get checked out." Immediately, was in concussion protocol and lost for the game. But I think that was a big loss, because I think he was a big part of the game plan today.
I bet they wanted him back in full force.
Yeah,
I bet that was the number one priority.
Because
today.
all that short stuff, all that, even though it was a conservative game running the ball, it was probably a conservative game passing the football too, and that's the bread and butter of
just the underneath
of
little 5-yard drag.
Boom,
get there,
boom, get
turn
that
upfield,
run after the catch and stuff like that. So I think missing him, definitely hurt. You hope he speeds, through the protocol. They're obviously, gonna take their time, make sure everything's right with him. But it sounded from Dan that he gave him the thumbs up. He was feeling pretty good. It wasn't a severe situation. We'll obviously have to see and how he goes through the protocol, and they'll be careful with that. But getting him back, getting Swift back, I think that will help. But I think Jared's got to play a little bit better too.
Yeah.
Now you look at the statistics with Jared, and look, 21 of 26, 228, but the 2 picks, it's taking care of the football. When you don't have those weapons, you just can't compound it. When you don't have the big plays like you talked about, you can't turn it over, because that's just, you can't get those points, those chunk plays back enough when turnovers lead to points and now you're behind. It just puts you behind the 8 ball.
And I think offensively, you probably learned a little bit today about what you can do even outside of Swift and St. Brown. Those tight end screens, getting those guys involved, that really worked today against an elite defense. So you break that out against some of these lesser teams. I think there's stuff on tape today that you can then take to Miami and Green Bay and certainly Chicago and see, what might work against not as impressive units.
Now it's go time.
Yeah.
Now you come home. Now you're in must-win situations.
Two at home again. I mean, we talked about that. These home chunks that after Thanksgiving it's 3. Thanksgiving is 3 at home. You get 2 home here. I think these home chunks are very beneficial on the schedule.
Miami, Green Bay, who lost to Washington on Sunday, and Chicago. To me, that you got to put 3 together.
Yep.
And if you want to be in this thing, if you want to stay, right behind Minnesota, who's on the bye this week, but they're at 5-1. If this is gonna, if you're gonna make this interesting, if you're gonna be in that graphic in December, in the graphic, in the hunt, you've got to win these next 3 games. It's come to that now because you've put yourself in a hole.
Yeah, I mean, gotta have the crowd out at Ford Field and get ready for an AFC matchup.
It should be a big one. It is a big one because
it is a big one.
It's one they've got to have. So, obviously a little bit disappointing, to come back from Dallas and the performance the way they did. Had a chance to go up in the fourth quarter. Can't get it done, kind of can't get out of their own way offensively, and that's got to be really disappointing. But hey, now you're in a hole. And Jared said it, like it's through adversity that you find your
back
character
against the wall.
Now you'll see what this team's all about because now they've got to win. So obviously it'll be a busy week in Allen Park as we get ready to welcome in Miami. We'll break that all down on DetroitLions.com all week. We'll have a 20-minute in the Huddle podcast midweek and. You'll join me Sunday night.
I'll be there.
We'll talk a little Miami Dolphins at Ford Field.
We'll see what happens.
All right, let's do it. Well, thank you guys for joining me. Disappointing, but let's hope the Lions can turn it around next week.